AJ Harper. I'm the author of Write a Must Read, and I help authors write books that people actually read, finish, take action on, love, and recommend. What question should you ask your publisher? I get this question a lot. What should I ask them? I'm going to do this in two parts. There'll be a second video because let's first talk about the questions you should ask when you're deciding if you should go with that publisher. And some of these questions might surprise you. I want you to ask them questions that will help you vet them so you can decide if they're the right publisher for you. And then I'm going to do a second video that's for your publisher after you sign the deal. Okay, so let's split these up. First, I want you to ask a really important question, and it's going to seem super obvious, and it might even feel like, I don't know if I want to ask that because it's kind of like asking a person why they want to date you. Maybe you don't, maybe you shouldn't ask. Maybe it's like fishing for compliments, but it's really important that you do this. So the first question is, why do you want to publish my book? Seems so basic, but this is for a chemistry read. Do they believe in it at all? If you're working with, say, a top tier hybrid that's super selective, they're going to have an answer to that question. If you're working with a traditional publisher, they're probably going to have an answer to that question. A publisher who is mostly operating like a factory and is not selective might stumble through that question. Here's the thing, no publisher is perfect. There's always going to be bumps. There's always going to be challenges. There's always going to be frustrations. That's just how it is. That's the industry. It's not indicative of anything that's wrong with you. And sometimes it's not even indicative of anything that's wrong with them. You need to at least know that even if everything isn't perfect, your publisher cares about your book. They are into it. There's a difference between publishers who are just transactional and trying to help you get your book to market. And there's a lot of them in the thought leadership space that aren't necessarily book people. What you want is a book person. You want your publisher to care about your book because they love books and they love what you're doing with your book, because that is the beginning of a good relationship. So even if there are bumps and challenges, at least they care about it. Why do you want to publish my book? They should have a good answer and it should be easy for them to answer it. All right, so let's get down to some other questions you might not have thought to ask. What is your editorial process? So why are you asking? You want to make sure that it is rigorous. You should have at least 3 editors. Your substantive editor, which is sometimes also called a developmental editor, and will not have that title, just so we're clear, because we have to make this so confusing in publishing. But it's the person that's doing usually 2 passes of a big 30,000 foot view. Sometimes they are also doing the line edit, okay? Then you need a separate copy editor and a separate proofreader. So you, by asking, what is your editorial process, you can see, are they rushing me through this? Are they skipping any of that? Are they only giving me one editor and shortchanging me? So that's the purpose of asking, what is your editorial process? Here's another big one, and most authors don't know to ask. Do you have trade distribution? I'm going to have to create a whole bunch of videos on trade distribution to explain this to you. But think of it like this. Trade distribution means you have a sales team who is not just fulfilling demand, but creating demand for your book. You want that, right? Now, not everybody can get trade distribution. Not everybody even wants to deal with that because that's why books take so long to get to market. You think, oh, publishing's so slow. It's really mostly about the distribution. That's what takes so long. You need to ask, do you have that or not? Or are you just putting my book up without a sales team? And you may say, that's fine. I'm cool with that. But you should ask. And then you need a follow-up question, which I learned the hard way because I had my students asking this question, getting the yes answer, but then it was actually really no. So here's the second part. Who does your trade distribution? So that you can look it up. Is it legit? Or is it this in-house thing that's sort of nebulous and you don't really know what's happening? Do they have a trouble answering that question? Or are they just saying Ingram Content Group? You got to find out. Okay, here's another question you might not know to ask. One of the best reasons to go with a publisher is they know how to position a book for success. They know what's coming down the pike. They know about trends. They know all the things. So they should be able to answer you when you ask, How will you position my book for success? Position meaning within that marketplace. They should have a really good answer for you. Again, if they're stumbling over these questions, you might want to rethink them as a potential publishing partner. Then I think it's important for you to ask some things that might be, maybe they won't matter to you, but I think they should matter to you. Like, for example, can we get started on my cover and metadata? Metadata meaning title, subtitle, author bio, book description, a couple other things. Can we get started on it early? Just ask them, because that means that your book might be listed for pre-order earlier than you think, and you don't want delays with that, okay? So just ask, is that a possibility? And then ask them, when will my book be available for pre-order? Little hot tip, you often won't know. Publishers forget to tell you, and sometimes your editor doesn't even know because they're not involved in that part. So it's not a bad thing if they didn't tell you, they just might not be aware of it. Still, ask, when will my book be available for pre-order? Because you're going to want to get started on those pre-orders really soon. I also think it's important to ask if you can be the one to record your audiobook. If you're writing a nonfiction book and you have done some voice training, because that is important. You want to do a good job. So you might have to have that written into your contract. Sometimes publishers won't let nonfiction authors record their own books, but we know that readers love to hear from the actual author. So see if you can get that. Then I want you to ask, do you have veto rights on the title and cover? Most of the time you will. You're not going to have the final say on some of that stuff, but you should have veto rights. And then I want you to ask, how many subsidiary rights, and that's translation rights, serial rights, etc., deals do they typically do for their titles? I just want to see, is that happening? Because it's one thing to say we have a subsidiary rights division, we have translation rights, etc. It's another thing to say we routinely get X number of deals for books, right? And every book's different. They can't guarantee it for you, but I want to make sure that they have a good working system for that and that they're actively looking for those deals for your book. So those are your questions that you might not have thought to ask and that should help you make a good decision. But the most important one of all is, why do you want to publish my book? In the description, you'll see a free download for my publishing path matrix. It's kind of like choose your own adventure to help you figure out what publishing path is best for you based on your priorities and your resources.